Robert Kiyosaki just predicted that a bank that is much bigger than Silicon Valley Bank is going to fail next. Let's take a look.
The problem is the bond market. And my prediction, I called Lehman Brothers years ago, and I think the next bank to go is Credit Suisse. And if that happens, Japan
because of its exposure to a lot of this.
Yes, because the bond market is crashing. All those bonds. Let's say you're getting paid 5% for a bond, and it goes to 10%. The 5% bond crashes, and the bond market is much bigger than the stock market, as we know. So
Absolutely.
The Fed is the problem, and they're what they say, the firemen and the arson.
Credit Suisse had total assets of $574 billion at the end of 2022, down 37% from $912 billion at the end of 2020. Its asset management arm supervises another $1.7 trillion in assets, and those numbers dwarf anything seen at Silicon Valley Bank, which had total assets of $212 billion only. And the market is now pricing in a probability of default of 47% for Credit Suisse. And Robert was on Fox 2 days ago, so this is pretty interesting. While it was no secret that Credit Suisse was at risk for the longest time, no one was really talking about it much 2 days ago. Robert was one of the first people. And today, everyone is talking about it because that is why the markets are down. Credit Suisse has been a shady bank for a long time, and this bank being in trouble comes as no surprise to anyone who follows this bank closely.
You know what's weird about this jolt, Robert? I want to get your thoughts on it. This bank, Silicon Valley Bank, they could talk about poor management. I know a lot has been said about that, but more than half their overall portfolio was in U.S. Treasuries, Treasury notes and bonds. Certainly not mortgage-backed derivatives, certainly not crappy mortgage-backed derivatives sold in separate pools to unwilling and unknowing investors. So they were doing something that seems on paper to have been the right thing, the conservative thing. The irony was that they were buying a lot of this when rates are at zero, prices were a lot higher for Treasury notes and bonds, and when they had to unload some money, they were underwater. So you can't win in that environment.
No. And that's why I said the biggest problem, as you know, is the bond market.
The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank was a wake-up call to many. People figured out that Silicon Valley Bank did not have their deposits, and so the bank run started. But the truth is, none of the banks ever really have your deposits. They lend your money to others. In Silicon Valley Bank's example, a big portion of that was lent to the government. Wells Fargo wants to raise $9.5 billion with a new shelf offering. Looks like they want to raise more money. That's probably not a great sign. When Silicon Valley collapsed, some Wells Fargo customers had issues, and this is not just one person that had an issue. There were multiple people. They are probably fine, but certainly it's not reassuring to see a bank raising more money than other banks are having extreme issues.
The biggest problem, as you know, is the bond market, which is the biggest market in the world. And all the countries of the world are in U.S. bills, T-bills and T-bonds. And we had the BRICS nations coming up, and they hate us, and they might switch to the Chinese gold, yuan. So we're in serious trouble.
Now, specifically in this situation, I think there are other big problems. For example, the chairman of the board of Credit Suisse is called Mr. Lehman. Seriously, Mr. Lehman? You mean like the investment bank Lehman Brothers, which filed for bankruptcy on September 15th in 2008? And that was the biggest bankruptcy ever declared in the United States of America? Yeah, I don't think you want to have that name if you work in banking. Definitely not. And look at his face. Even he is concerned. It's like he's saying, yeah, I know. And even with my name, I made it in the banking industry. Luckily, though, it doesn't seem like he has any kind of affiliation with actual Lehman Brothers. I think we're fine here. And I double-checked with ChatGPT, and yes, Seems like there is indeed no affiliation at all. But this institution was so badly run. Credit Suisse paid over $11 billion in fines and penalties since 2000. And this crisis seemingly is escalating. The Bank of England is holding emergency talks as the Credit Suisse crisis worsens.
Well, U.S. dollar is losing its hegemony in the world right now. So, and they're going to print more and more and more of this, trying to keep this thing from sinking. So that's why.
But they've been doing that. But that's been going on for years, right, Robert? I mean, we have these huge days like this, and you're quite right to note it's a clear phenomenon today. But we've had these punctuating our history over the last 20 plus years. What makes this go round different?
Because our debt to GDP is over 130, and every time they raise those interest rates, America's taxpayer gets hammered.
According to Ray Dalio, we are coming to the end of the long cycle. We have borrowed a lot, and we also have these shorter cycles that everyone looks at, but everyone misses the long-term picture. We see these short cycles because they are 5 to 8 years, and we remember them during our lifetimes, but the long cycles that are 75 or 100 years, we don't notice them because we just pay attention to what is happening right now, and we do not see the big picture. Robert is pointing at the obvious. Well, this is going to come to the end, and he thinks it is going to be now.
And my concern is the pensions are in trouble because they're loaded with bonds also. And my generation, the boomers, we're starting to retire. So this is the perfect storm in many ways. So like I said again, is I think the Fed and the FDIC signaled they're going to print again, which makes stocks good. But this little silver coin here is still the best. It's $35, you know. So I reckon anybody can afford $35, and I'm concerned about Credit Suisse.
Interesting. I have heard that before. If you get a big bank that has this exposure, and Credit Suisse does have a lot of conservative treasuries all in its portfolio, that has been raised. The bank said it is well financed, well secured, and all of that.
Well, that lasted for a whole day because Credit Suisse yesterday found material weakness in its financial reporting and it scrapped executive bonuses. Interestingly, the annual report was supposed to be published last Thursday, but ultimately got delayed by a call from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. If your documents are delayed because you got a call from the SEC, sounds like you are in deep trouble because it appears that you are going to publish them. But now you got this call and things came up and you probably did not have good answers for these things, and maybe you even had to change a few things before publishing the final report. I also just saw some information that was published that basically said Credit Suisse just got bailed out, and technically that's not really true. They haven't failed yet, so they can't really get bailed out. However, Swiss National Bank says it will provide Credit Suisse with liquidity if necessary. So this is sort of like an agreement to bail them out before the bailout is even really required. That's how dedicated the Swiss are to their banking system. The Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority and the Swiss National Bank said that Credit Suisse meets the capital and liquidity requirements imposed on systemically important banks and that the central bank will step in if a situation changes. Today specifically, Credit Suisse tanked because the Saudis that invest in Credit Suisse said they are not giving any more money to Credit Suisse, and they cited regulatory reasons. They said we do not want to own more than 10%, but I think the real reason is they just think the bank is in deep trouble and they don't want to give it any more money because probably they are going to lose it. And this bank is just filled with terrible issues. In June, the bank was convicted of failing to prevent money laundering by a Bulgarian cocaine trafficking gang. This was in 2022. This whole story is crazy. They even hire private detectives to spy on their former executives. What kind of secrets are you keeping? And if you thought that that Bulgarian gang was just the first time Credit Suisse dealt with something like that, no. Back in 2004, according to The Guardian, there was money laundering for the Japanese gang. They breached US sanctions. In 2011, they evaded German taxes. In 2012, they were charged for bond fraud. And then more tax evasion, this time in the US. More tax evasion, but now in Italy. And more money laundering, but in the US. It just doesn't stop this bank. It's crazy. It looks like the bank would fail anyway, but now with all of this going on, it seems like it is going to fail faster. And maybe that's good, because this bank is filled with absolutely disgusting incidents. I would like to never hear about Credit Suisse again. But probably we will see more about it in the news very soon. And this is the Tesla stock buying opportunity explained by Elon Musk. My name is Matt Posius. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.